Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's online policy dialogue on shaping the new European adaptation strategy, how territories and civil society are contributing to the future integrated framework for climate resilience and risk management. This session is a side event of the Climate Academy organized by Platforma, CMR, and UCLG. I would like to thank them for having us as a partner of this session. My name is Axel Griffon. I'm policy advisor at the CMR, and I'm very pleased to open this session. This session is organized by CMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, and the association Climate Change. Together, our two organizations bring the voices of local and regional governments, civil society, and non-state actors into the heart of the climate debate. And we aim to mobilize a very broad community of local leaders, but also practitioners and a wide range of stakeholders. Today's discussion comes at a very important moment. The European Commission is preparing an integrated framework on climate adaptation, for which both CMR and Climate Change have prepared policy papers. To identify what is needed to strengthen Europe's resilience and ensure that adaptation policy are actionable, fair, and involving all stakeholders from the ground, we have gathered today experts from local governments, private sectors, insurance sector, and civil society to exchange about the reality of climate adaptation. So thank you very much for joining us. I now would like to invite Mr. Fabrizio Rossi, CMR Secretary General, to open the discussion. Mr. Ronan Dantec, President of Climate Change, new local councillor of the city of Nantes, and CMR spokesperson on climate, will then chair the discussion. Fabrizio, the floor is yours.
Just let's say I would like to share a few reflections with you today on the side of CMR, the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. We are indeed working on climate adaptation since already many years within our expert group within CMR, the expert group that brings together all the experts from the National Association of Local Governments from 40 countries in Europe. Thanks to their commitment and thanks to the work they are doing all together, we are able to present our position, our political position to the European Union and to be part of the political dialogue on the policy-making process on climate and on climate adaptation more specifically. So this is our strength. This is what we do at the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. Let me check with Ronan and with the team whether they wish me to start to share a few reflections. Maybe in this way I give you a bit of time to catch up with the technicalities. I see no thumbs up, but given I feel a little bit like the host today, thank you, I see one. I feel a little bit like we are somehow hosting this meeting. Maybe I'll get the ball rolling if you allowed me. Sharing a few reflections about climate adaptation and really bringing a few headlines from the position paper that we developed at CMR, at the Council of European Municipalities and Regions. Well, first of all, maybe let me say that from a communication perspective, I think that we all agree on the fact that we really need to create a new narrative, a new compelling narrative about the need to work on climate adaptation. Unfortunately, this is not always, from a political perspective, it's not always easy to have our communities on the ground understanding the need to work on climate adaptation. It's not easy, but it is absolutely needed. And if I think of this narrative, to me, there is an element that, from my perspective, I had the impression that is not really emphasized enough. We are not saying enough that we as European, and this is something that we should communicate better to our people, to our citizens, we as Europeans, we hold a record today, which is not necessarily a badge of honor. Europe today is the continent that is warming the fastest. We are not saying this clearly enough today, but this says a lot about the urgency that we have as Europeans to work on climate adaptation. I think the average of the climate, the temperature rising in Europe is 0.5 in the next 0.5 per decade since the 90s. And this is probably about twice the global average. This is an absolutely alarming data. Starting by sharing this point, I can tell you that within the position paper that we approve at CMR and the Council of European Municipalities and Regions, there are two very strong points that I think are really relevant to this debate. The first point, and this is really something that it's extremely worrying to many of our mayors, to many local elected officials all across Europe. The first worrying issue is about the lack of means to work on climate adaptation. This won't be a surprise to many of you, but we need to state this very clearly. We are running absolutely out of financial needs to address climate adaptation properly. We are really lacking the means to work on climate adaptation in a structured and sound way. Many cities, municipalities in Europe, unfortunately, they are fighting against the same problem, which is budget deficit. This is a very serious issue. This impedes many of them to keep investing on climate adaptation. So this is absolutely a need that should be addressed. Even though the European Union, the share of funding dedicated to climate adaptation versus mitigation is growing, I think that we are not there yet. We are not yet where we should be. This is evident, and most importantly, assessing that funding sometimes is very difficult. So we should make that funding more accessible to our municipalities and to our leaders. The second point I would like to highlight, the second problem that our municipalities are facing is I would say the complexity of climate adaptation. I see that the team and the moderator is now back with us. Ronan, I hope you were able to solve your technical challenges. I took the liberty to jump in, but I'm very happy to give the microphone back to you. Colleagues, thank you very much for bearing with us.
Thank you, Fabrizio. As you program, but your presentation was very clear about the priorities for local government. And for the introducing the opening remarks, I give the floor to the European Environmental Agency, who play, of course, a very important role about these issues. I give you the floor.
Thank you for this invitation. My name is Cristiana Fotiadu, and I'm a senior expert at the European Environment Agency on the unit of climate risk and resilience. And I will try in the next 10 minutes to reflect with you on the increasing climate risk that Europe is facing. I will try to present to you some key findings that we have produced, and I will also highlight the importance of building resilience to these risks in order to ensure Europe's future security, competitiveness, and quality of life. And I will close with the subnational level, with the regional level, and where you can find some inspiring solutions that will help you in this work, and hopefully make the connection to the upcoming framework on climate resilience. Now, you are all aware that we are facing, as we have heard also before, we're all aware of the magnitude of the climate risks in Europe and the world for that matter. And we see the impacts quite often on our society, environment, and economy. And within the first European climate risk assessment we have published, we note that Europe is the world's fastest warming continent. And in high warming scenarios, Europe could be facing heating up to 7 degrees by the end of the century. And now different regions of Europe will face different challenges, but we will all face them. The problem is how to identify the risk and how to prepare. And climate risk assessments play an important role here, and hopefully they will play a significant role in the upcoming resilience framework. And they should also be included or considered in all sectoral policies for that matter. Now, my first slide talks about the EEA's first European Climate Risk Assessment, or EUCRA-1, as it was known, where we have identified a total of 36 major climate risks for Europe, grouped into 5 broad clusters, and those are the ecosystems, food, health, infrastructure, and economy and finance. And we have categorized these clusters by the urgency that we need to react, and the risk ownership. And each one of these risks identified have the potential to cause significant environmental degradation, economic damages, social emergencies, and potential even political turbulences. And their combined effects are even more significant. If I can have this next slide, please. Now, the water sector in particular is a special category in our European climate risk assessment because it's an overarching sector. Water security underpins ecosystems, infrastructure, public health, food systems, and economic stability. It is absolutely vital to the future security of Europe. Water scarcity is one of the most important pressing risks we face. The map on the left in your screen is from our recently published Europe's Environment Report. We published this last autumn, and it shows the seasonal water scarcity across the EEA member countries. The chart on the right shows water consumption by sector. Agriculture is both the #1 consumer of water and also the sector with the highest exposure to climate risks. Now you see that most Southern European member states already experience year-round water stress, and it is expected that they will continue to face growing competition for water between agriculture, tourism, public supply, and energy. Next slide, please. Now, moving on to the economic implications, extreme climate events combined with the cumulative pressures of global heating pose significant risk to our society, as well as potentially staggering economic costs. And the map that you see in your screen shows the economic losses per capita from climate change impacts for the period 1980 to 2024. This is an economic indicator we produce annually at the EEA. Extreme heat, floods, and droughts cost the EU an estimated of 822 billion euro between this period, with 1/4 of this amount incurring in the last 4 years alone. Now, we also know that climate change is a risk multiplier. It can exacerbate existing risks and amplify crises, with risk cascading from one system, sector, or region to another. Recent independent studies by the agency and also by the European Commission, we tried to examine this, and we have identified, depending of course on different climate scenarios, in order to make this the sector's climate resilience, we may require investments of between 60 to 130 billion euro annually by 2050. But still, the current commitment of funding is only 15 to 16 billion euro per year, underscoring the scale of this challenge. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, nonetheless, European countries are preparing and they're making progress towards climate resilience. And at the agency, we're also responsible for the adaptation reporting under the governance regulation. So we try to analyze the reported information that countries are providing us on progressing towards resilience. And I will I will give you some key points on how the EU member states responded for the subnational level. And of course, not all member states reported on the subnational level, but still we cannot have a European conclusion, but still we can identify some trends. And those trends are the following, specifically on the governance and funding. 83% of those that reported have adaptation plans and strategies, but most of them, they have identified strong horizontal engagement among local actors, but still limited vertical engagement with higher levels of government. We have identified 85% of adaptation measures that are reported are funded through authorities on budget, and still the funding is considered a bottleneck between planning and implementation phases. And we see this problem also on the national scale to be present. Next slide, please. Now, EEA was also involved in the European Mission on Adaptation, a very important step to enhance regional climate resilience. And we have focused on developing the regional adaptation support tool to help local authorities to advance climate resilience. And we have provided also further access to climate information as climate hazards, exposure, and vulnerability. And we are going soon to produce the analysis of the subnational reported information for city level. And with that, I will proceed to my last slide, if you bear with me. And I would like to close with giving you some examples from solutions that we have gathered in Climate Adapt. Climate Adapt is the European platform on adaptation co-owned by the European Commission and the agency, where one can find many other topics, several information on solutions categorized by key type measures and level of governance. And we start from transnational to national all the way to local. So you see how many case studies are present per category. And this is important because these case studies are considered best practices and they can be as inspiration and provide capacity building to other regions that face similar climate risks and impacts. And at the local level specifically, we see many practical adaptation actions where one can see how beyond risk reduction, resilience creates new competitive advantages through circularity and innovation. Now, I hope you can find it inspiration in our products and further help. And we will continue in our work with the second round of the European Climate Risk Assessment in the next years. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a lovely panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Christiana. It was a very precise presentation of the framework and all the challenge for all the non-state actors and local government. Maybe just a new information in France this year for insurance, the cost of the different extreme program, it's 5 billion euros. Last year it was 3 billion. This year it's 5 billion with problem of flood, for example, fire. It's a lot of money. And I integrate that you said about 85% of adaptation action, it's our own budget. It's very important to integrate this. There is no magic money. A lot of action is with our actual budget. It's, I think, important to understand all this. To discuss now And thank you, Christiana. We have our panel. We have not our Scottish colleague. It's Fabrizio who speaks for CMR, but we have a very interesting panel with for the private sector, Valentine Huet, head of climate adaptation strategy of Vinci. For insurance sector, very important. It's very important to discuss with insurance sector. Today, Thomas Alvarez, head of study and international relations of AGEA, and for civil society NGO representative, Nikolai Sindorf, chief technical analyst of AGWA. Our idea is always the same with climate change. We organize this meeting between climate change and CMR is to cross the proposal of the different non-state actors, business, civil society, and local government, who is not really a non-state actor, but it's not the question today, and to see what are our common advocacy, our common vision of the situation. Maybe to introduce this panel and this discussion. A question to all the panelists. Of course, you present briefly your organization and what is for you our two major challenges for climate adaptation in Europe. As Fabrizio has already an introduction, maybe just the three other panelists about this priority. For Vinci and private sector, Valentine Huet, head of climate adaptation strategy of Vinci.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm glad to speak about this topic, which is like very important for Vinci, because we are implemented in various countries in the world, but especially in Europe, where we are from, because it's a French company initially. So basically, Vinci is employing almost 300,000 people, and also we have three core areas of work. The first one is construction, then we have the energy, and then the mobility. And finally, as I said, we are present in a lot of countries, and especially Europe. Next slide, please. So, like in my previous slide, I told you that we are doing construction, mobility, and energy, and this is what we are experiencing. So basically, there are two main dynamics that we are observing. The first one with the concessions. So concessions are mobility infrastructure that we are having for some years. More or less, it's about 30 to 40 years. And we are experiencing a lot of already impacts of climate change on them. The picture you can see is an airport in Japan. So it might feel a bit far away, but we could have the same picture for other infrastructure in France, or in many countries, in Germany as well, we had the same. And this is just flooding, but we are impacted by also wildfires, but also storms. So all the climate hazards are impacting our networks. So this is also impacting not only for the people, which is of course the first main concern, but also economically for the region, because usually it's quite important infrastructures. We also sometimes have like some of the highways we have, or some of the airport in some region, these infrastructure are like vital for the all the emergencies, health, safety, and emergencies we can have. So this is important to have like resilient infrastructure to be able to save as much as we can and avoid any losses we could have. We are also seeing, for example, and Ronan, you mentioned it, the deductible of insurances increasing, because of course these are more risky assets. Insurance can define that, and so this is very important, and that's why we are doing within Vinci Concessions. So Vinci Concessions is about the airport, but also the highways and the railways in Europe, but also worldwide. And we are doing, for the existing network, we have some climate adaptation plans for the most at-risk assets. So this year, for example, we'll do more than 30 climate adaptation plan. And just to give you an idea, we have around hundreds of assets to take care of. So it is 1/3 that will have their climate adaptation plan, and this is quite a long process because we have to. So of course there is a common guideline, but then climate adaptation is very much local, so we have to adapt it to each context, and this is very precious because we got a lot of insight and new ideas on how to make it more resilient, but this takes time, of course. So this is one thing we're doing for this year and will continue in the coming years. But also we are giving to the people locally some climate adaptation toolbox to raise awareness with action-based training, but also solution catalogs. Also, we have internally a tool at Vinci that gives us the modelization of climate hazards in the coming decades. So we can also adjust the actions to when we know, for example, it's going to be a rise of flooding in, 2030, then we know we should really invest into against flooding for 2030, for example, and if it's like more heat waves in 2050, then we do the same before 2050. So it really helps us to have a vision on how we and when we should act and finance the different actions to make more resilient infrastructure. And then, of course, also since it's a big network, as I showed you for Vinci Concessions, we are also creating a community. I call that Adaptation community. So it really helps people to discuss on the do's and don'ts, but also like some learning from the experience they all had on implementing solutions or on other type of things. And then we also have like support from the holding in Paris, where we help all of them to create contact between each others and make more resilient infrastructure in the end. Then, and I saw some question, I will answer it, of course, after if you need, but then we have another dynamic which is about construction, Vinci Energies, and Vinci real estate, so immobilier, as you can see here. And this is very different because here we are seeing mostly that in the procurement, and especially in the French one, since also the last national adaptation plan that was released in 2025, sorry, we are seeing more and more incentives to think through a climate at +4 degrees, because in France, that's the target we got. And this is really like a good thing because we can now propose project for that, because until now, and since also now we have and this is my next point on my next slide, but we have issues with proposing alternatives to the different public procurement, because basically we have to answer exactly, and that's next slide, sorry, the slide after. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just gonna go on that. So, and we can come back briefly on the other one afterwards, but that's basically what we're observing, is that we need as Europeans to have a common base of understanding and vision. And for experience with the French National Adaptation Plan with the +4 degree targets, no matter what we think about the +4, at least it gave us all together, public and private entities, a common understanding, a common vision to go to. And this is very much helpful because even us as private companies, we can also help our client, guide our client towards these objectives, because until now, even if you wanted to propose something, we couldn't, because it was not very much heard. And this is my second proposition that we have, is that to have the possibility to add climate-proof alternatives in the public procurement. It's coming probably in France. We are seeing maybe with the European one something coming as well. But see, if we don't have that, we really cannot go forward, because the idea is, so the client, when they receive proposals, they have the business as usual proposition and then a more climate proof proposition. And so at least they can see also maybe with cost of action versus inaction, what it could look like in the coming years. So I know it's a bit more midterm or even long-term vision, but it really helps, I think, for people to decide. And the last point, my concluding point, will be about financing. So we need to find finance. So of course, we are here as well to finance if needed, but participate to this financing. PPPs are one of the leverage to do that. So we need to rethink them to be more adapted to the climate change that we will experience, but also stress test the project with socio-economical, both environmental aspects. So we make sure that all the aspects of climate adaptation will be in this stress testing, and make sure to choose the right decision at the right moment on the right contexts, basically, for the today and tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. We have not all the day to discuss. We have a lot of questions, but we integrate all your point. Public procurement, for example, is very, very important. I give the floor for the priority, and you are for 5 minutes just for
I'll try
that.
my best.
Yeah, sorry, we are
I've
late.
typed it before, so it should work.
In 5 minutes, Nikolai Sinder for
Yes.
Agua. What are your priorities after we have time in the second round to exchange and to deep some point? 5 minutes, your priorities, please.
Yes, okay. So I'm Nicolai Schindorf. I'm based in the Netherlands. I'm a chief technical analyst of AGWA, the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation. AGWA used to be based in Europe. It's now based in the USA, but at the moment we are opening a new office again in a couple of weeks in Europe. In my talk, I'll mainly have the entry point of water, as it is so instrumental for climate adaptation planning. So AGWA was founded in 2010. We are an international NGO with over 2,000 network members, all with an interest in climate resilient water management. Altogether, over the years, we have experience in about more than 40 countries. This list here is about 4 key programs where we work on climate planning, on climate resilience, on economic resilience, on water utilities resilience. And we also operate at the international level with the UN and its agencies. In this talk, I will be focusing on the water resilience tracker because that is our key program now, and it's based on climate governance. In the water resilience tracker, we work with ARUP, Deltares, IMI, and it's funded by UK and government and German governments. The water resilience tracker has been applied in over 15 countries to help governments assess and strengthen how water resilience is embedded in their national climate plans. 2 things here are worth mentioning. First, we work alongside governments. Our role is to provide structured diagnostics and build capacity together with counterparts, and those should be grounded in local realities. Second, we work all over the world, but we see that in the countries where we work, there is a pattern recognizable, which would be of importance in working in European water governance. Next slide, please. So we were asked to think about 2 challenges, and the first challenge which we encounter in our work is the national to local governance gap. National governments make ambitious commitments in their climate planning. The gap between those commitments and what basing authorities, cities and water boards and utilities can act on is where resilience is won or lost. The information, the mandates, the finance, all need to reach people managing water day to day, and that translation is where the most important work happens. This is fundamentally a governance question. The connection between the EU framework ambitions and what a river basin authority in Portugal or a water utility in a mid-sized city in Poland can deliver is exactly the same structural challenges we work on elsewhere in the world. In the water resilience tracker, we create what we call a line of sight from national commitments down to basin level to city level and back up again. It does this by asking governments to diagnose where their frameworks actually function, to co-create resilience indicators with local actors, and then align finance flows accordingly. We are doing this from Amazon tributaries to Alexandria in Egypt, with the Nepal government in the Himalayas, and just this week with the Shire Basin in Malawi. It's important to mention that this works not only vertically, but also horizontally. It should work across sectors and between countries and other organizations. Next slide, please. The challenge number 2 is about structural inclusion. Climate impacts are not evenly distributed. Women and children are 14 times more likely to die in climate-related disasters. The communities most exposed to water stress are the least represented in the rooms where adaptation plans are written. Global frameworks at the United Nations acknowledge this. The Paris Agreement references gender equality, and last year in the COP, the Belém Gender Action Plan adopted a 9-year framework with 27 activities and 98 deliverables. But these are still largely procedural commitments. They expand representation. They do not yet distribute decision-making power or finance or create agency for excluded and vulnerable groups. For example, in an analysis of our own, we show that fewer than a quarter of the countries that have submitted their voluntary national reviews included disability aggregated data. So fewer than a quarter did not include any information on disability. And a World Bank study shows that involving women in project design increases effectiveness by up to 7 times. So the case for structural inclusion is not values-based, it's also a performance-based. In AGWA, we responded to this with a REAL rubric. REAL stands here for resilience, equity, agency, and lived experience. It's a practical screening tool we embed in how national indicator frameworks are designed. We do this together with the countries. Inclusion is resilience. The rubric frames how the human dimensions of water security remain visible in the measurement systems that drive planning and investment of climate adaptation. It provides ways forward to inclusion and resilience. It stimulates vulnerable groups to become essential agents in adaptation planning. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and you have 1 minute, and the focus is
okay. So what we do is in our water resilience track, we bring this together, and these are the countries we are working in. And I think the things we learned elsewhere, they will work in Europe as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time during the different roundtable to give some point, but I understand a very important point that in the last European strategy, there was a pillar about international cooperation, and it's very important in the new strategy to conserve, and it was a part of the Marseille Declaration, this cooperation with the South and Africa first. To finish this first roundtable, I give the floor to the insurance sector representative, Thomas Alvarez, Head of Studies and International Relations of AGEA. AGEA, it is, I don't know the word in English, it is the courtier. The courtier are on the field with direct link with people who have problems with flood or with wind, and how you see this role of insurance, and maybe first you present, of course, your organization.
Yeah, I'm going to be really brief because we will talk about this in the other rounds. So AGEA is the National Federation of the Insurance General Agents. So we represent the 12,500 insurance agents in France. So general agents, they are independent professionals. They sell insurance policies on behalf of their insurance company. Thanks to the expertise they have and the continuous training they are required to undertake, general insurance agents act as technical support specialists for both private individuals, businesses. They advise the clients on the prevention and management of major natural risks. So since 2022, AGA is working on the consequences of climate change for the insurance sector, focusing on two main areas, which is the insurability of territories and assets exposed to climate risk. So that is to say, how a house can be actually insured if it is exposed to flooding, to drought, to storms, which is something that is really important in France because we have a lot of natural risk hazards, especially in the territories overseas. So we have major problem regarding certain territories which are actually very difficult to insure, and this is one of the major area we want to deal with. And the second area we want to focus on is the insurability of the tools and the stakeholders of who are involved in the ecological transition. For example, we work on a very important study on the insurance of the renewable energies and especially the photovoltaic panels, which are very difficult to insure in France. And we are working on these issues with the aim of adapting the insurance sector and the society, especially the economic society, to the consequences of climate change. We want to ensure that all our fellow citizens have access to insurance. This is the first major point I want to point out, regardless of their sector of activity and the exposure of climate change. It's not because you're exposed to the storms that you don't have access to insurance. It is not possible to have this discourse. And secondly, we want to allow and to protect the investments in the natural hazards prevention, especially for houses and businesses. And to deal with that, we have to protect and guarantee an insurance protection for all these actors.
Okay.
It's okay for me for this first round.
Thank you very much. You have, it's good. Our first question, it's a very important focus on this discussion. It is the question of cooperation between the different actors. Maybe, Fabrizio, you are here. We start with this important question, with the question of the multi-level governance between all the level of public action, between national framework, European Union framework, national action, regional and local. How you see the situation, Fabrizio? You think your feeling is that we progress in this multi-level governance, or it's always difficult to integrate first local government in this strategy European of national strategy? Fabrizio.
Thank you very much, Ronan. Well, from my side, I guess there is no need for presentation. I have already introduced myself. The Council of European Municipalities and Regions brings together 60 national associations of local and regional governments. So just to give you a rough idea, this means more than 100,000 local governments, more than 1 million local elected officials. So the footprint we have is huge. And indeed, I would say, Ronan, we have quite a clear understanding on where multi-level governance is going today. And it's a bit of a tricky moment for us in Europe, because I think that in the last 30 years, we made major advancements on multi-level governance, including on climate change. And now actually the signals that we see out there are a bit worrying, because we see the tendency clearly for more centralization of the agendas, centralization of decision-making, including on the dossier that are strictly climate related. This is not a good news for us, and it's not a good news for especially for climate adaptation, because the specificity that we see in climate adaptation is that maybe this is a very specific to this area and to this file. In some areas, of course, there is the possibility to centralize the decision-making power, but climate adaptation is ultimately a place-based project, a place-based problem. Sorry, that's really why multi-level governance for this dimension is not just a nice to have, but it's absolutely a must. When I say that climate adaptation is really a place-based issue, what I mean is very clearly, if I think of my home country, Italy, for instance, this is a country that is really cut into parts. A northern part, northern Italy, the issue is flooding. And we see this more and more happening within our territories in the northern Italy. While on the contrary, in the southern part of Italy, they are dealing with wildfires and with droughts. So you see there is quite a contrast in there within the same country. And this is why it is absolutely important that we work on climate adaptation measure at local level together with the local authorities. Maybe, Ronan, a point I would like to share here before closing this quick intervention is about the data. Because I think, interesting enough, this is what brings all of us together from my perspective. This is one of the main elements that bring all of us together. When I hear about our friends from Vinci speaking, when I hear speaking the insurance sector, what is really needed here is data, because it's data that can indeed decrease the risk modeling for the insurance and for the reinsurance company. It is data that can understand really us to see really how the public procurement could be potentially affected by the climate disruption in the future. And it is data that we need at the local level. With one small caveat, data is needed to support the decision-making at the local level. Indeed, that's very clear. But the point is that here we have, it's not just about data, but we need people that understand the data, people that can process the data, and this is not easy. So data and tools goes together with an investment on human capital at the local level. The tools are not tools and data are not just a silver bullet that will solve all our problems. We need the tools, we need data, but we need also people that can understand those data. If you agree, Roman, I'll probably close this part here, and very curious to hear from the colleagues on this.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe just a few sentences. Of course, I agree with you that we are a little bit worried about the nationalization of some European budget, and it's not in the sense of the multi-level governance. Maybe with adaptation, we have a possibility to push this multi-level governance, because it's impossible to face adaptation if we have not this multi-level governance.
Absolutely. In this case, not involving the territories, not involving the municipalities, the local governments is not an option. Again, when we work on adaptation, multi-level governance is not just a nice to have; it's absolutely a must. If we pretend to impose adaptation from with a top-down approach, let's be very clear, this won't work at all.
Thank you, Fabrizio. The same question for private sector for Vinci, and we discussed, for example, public procurement and local public procurement, and we need to have evolution of the European framework about this point. For Vinci, with a big company, it's not, I think, in the culture to have exchange with local government, but with adaptation and with this evolution, maybe it's necessary to enforce this exchange with local and regional government. It is in your strategy?
I mean, it is definitely, and actually, like, especially with Vinci concessions, you know, when you have assets for like 40 years, I will take just an example, like for example, in the south of France, of course, you are always in link with the mayors, with the region, and also with of course, the states then. So it always has been part of the culture, and Vinci is very much decentralized as well. So it is part of the DNA, but it's true, I agree with you, Ronan, that this topic is definitely bringing a new layer to multi-level governance. And I think it is very precious to keep it, because we need everyone around the table to understand how, For example, an highway will affect potentially like the railway next to it, but also the village or the cities around it. So these interdependencies of networks is very important to understand to make them most resilient possible and make sure that no one will be left on the side. So that's a very much important thing. And just to come back to Fabrizio comments on the data to understand it, I fully agree. We are getting a lot and loads of new startups that are doing that, which is good. But also, you know, like we need to find like the right understanding to make the best like decision and having all the information for the decision makers and the right information. And finally, the top-down approach is not possible for climate adaptation. It's very much local, and we should nourish that as well. I mean,
in a few sentences, you have an advocacy to change the framework of local public procurement at the European level, maybe directly or with your networks of companies?
I mean, no, there is no advocacy on that. Usually, Vinci is not very much into advocacy in general, but this topic we have to deal with it anyway. For example, like so, I'm working mostly with Vinci concessions. So when we have, for example, like an highway in Brazil, and I'm speaking because this is an example that is quite striking. The state asked us to do a climate adaptation plan, and this was anyway in our plan to do it. But with this result of the climate adaptation plan, we might adjust the contract lines. Because to make more and new work on climate adaptation for the highways. So this is, you know, like also through the contracts, we are talking more and more with the different municipalities, because municipalities also through the states are getting more and more aware of the emergency to deal with it. So it is basically a win-win situation where we go to them, they are already aware of it, and, you know, then we can adjust and go further more faster together.
Thank you. Asia, of course, it's, as you are on the field, it's very important for you to discuss with local government, with local actors. You think that it's possible to progress and to diminish the risk linked with adaptation, and after to diminish refund? Of course, it is your job. You progress in these local discussions?
Yeah, we progress a lot because, as you say, the Ronan, the insurance agents, they are within the territories. They are actually very close to the population. And I would like to say that I fully agree with Fabrizio on the question of the data. I think that today we have a flood of data available on the rising costs associated with natural disasters worldwide. We know the cost of natural disaster. We know that it is going to be exponentially. We have a wealth of data and the extent to which different regions are exposed or not to the consequences of climate change. This data is generally publicly available. It is well sourced, and above all, the insurers often use it at the basis for developing their insurance policies. However, and this is your question, I think, we face challenges in assessing the local insurability, the local sustainability. Indeed, beyond the exposure to natural disasters, we lack a lot of data on the claims history, on the post-disaster repair costs, the extent to which assets are adapted to climate change, the preventive measures implemented. We lack a lot of data on this very local and regional stuff. This data is divided between, you have public data, which is not very understandable by the population. As Fabrizio say, we have to understand this data, which is, and we have to bring this data to the population, which is the main issue and something that is very difficult to do actually. And we have also private data, which is kept confidential by the insurance. For example, on the cost of the post-sinister reparation. Yet we need all this data, the public and the private one. We need all this data to assess how well prepared regions are to cope with climate change. And that's why it's very necessary to bring all the stakeholders at the local level on the table to understand the situation and prioritize the investments in the region most at risk and least prepared to natural disaster.
Thank you. It's very clear. And we integrate this question of data, who will be a question for the Climate Change Adaptation Summit in Brussels in June. For Agua too, it's very important to enforce this cooperation between civil society, local governments, and other sectors. You see the progress of this cooperation?
Yes, I think as a civil society organization is the advantage is that you're working with the local people. You know what drives them. If I think about resilience, the first step is not thinking about data, but it's about how people make decisions. What local knowledge do they have, and how can that be integrated into a higher level, linked to higher level planning. So what we are doing is we connect to those people. We bring them in the room with higher governments, going from government level to national level governance. Have them in a room, discuss about what problems they are facing and how they can work on that. I think data is an important aspect of that, but it's not everything. I think the inclusion of local knowledge, local people, and having all the people from all levels, all sectors around one table making the climate plans is a very strategic approach.
As civil society organization, you see the progress at the level of inhabitants of the culture of risk. They integrate today adaptation in their own strategy.
Yeah, we've seen that happening actually in the countries we are working. When we talk about, for example, implementing resilience indicators at the national level, it is important to have local people at the table designing those indicators. And where they're already being used, for resilience purposes, it's important to revise them with the local people or local people representatives being present at the national level. So that the resilience indicators, the climate indicators, the risk indicators, they connect to how people make use of it, how they can own them, and how they can make decisions based on that.
Thank you very much. Other question is the role of decentralized cooperation between European cities and territory, between North and South. It's a very important point. Question to Fabrizio. There is a progress in these exchanges about best practices and maybe data between the different territories in Europe. You feel that there is progress about this global culture?
Well, when you speak about decentralized cooperation, you are really touching something that is really close to my heart, because indeed, if I think of us as a human beings, what makes us very special compared to all the other living species is really this possibility to build networks across mountains and seas. This is very special. And I think this is also special about the work we do, working with cities and municipalities. Usually when we work with mayors at local level, they are very pragmatic, and there is not any ideological position about the need to cooperate with someone else on the other side of the ocean. This is understood very clearly. There is no political yes or no there. It's not about the political color. Everybody understands the needs to keep building bridges with other municipalities on the other side of the ocean. I think maybe what we are trying to do here specifically on climate, I think we need to change a little bit the focus of our partnership. Actually, the modalities, let me say, the modalities of our cooperation. I think in the past, bringing people together, it was enough, and building a twinning between cities was enough. Now, I think the approach should be more and more in creating a challenge-led cooperation, identifying one specific challenge on which the cities from Europe and from another continent can work together, trying really to bring in this dynamic, this vision of long-term financial sustainability on the work they do. And maybe also we need to do more to work on the communication element around this twinning, around this cooperation. Having two mayors cooperating and working together is great, but if we involve the local communities from those municipalities, from those cities, of course, we can scale up the impact of the work we do. So I think three elements here: work more on a challenge-driven cooperation between cities, trying really to involve the local communities, and trying to have these elements is the very beginning of the partnership building exercise, this element about the long-term financial sustainability of the cooperation that we have between the cities.
Thank you. Maybe for economic sector, for Vinci or AGEA, you can participate to enforce this cooperation if you see best practices in one territory that we can present in other territories. You explore, you see actually what are the good practices in each territory where you are actions. Vinci, you see that?
Yeah, so actually when we implement, first of all, for the climate adaptation plan, there is the last part. So of course there are like workshops between the different teams, and that's also like the first time, just to mention, it's the first time we have a topic that is such interdisciplinary with all the operational, technical, finance, environmental teams. So first, that's a new thing. And then we challenge what we are producing with the local authorities. To know like what is it compatible what they are doing, if not what we could do to adapt to their local plans, but also are there any things that we have missed and that we could add to make it more like resilient local wise. So this is something that we do with the local communities and mostly local stakeholders. And this is working very well, and we have only like good experiences. The only thing we're seeing is that sometimes we're a bit too early in the process compared to some local stakeholders. So we presented what we have done, and sometimes they didn't have anything in return that we have done regarding climate adaptation. So it is also a way to like maybe push the topic at the local level and make it more globally. So we make sure that everything is interconnected and resilient.
You see difference between the different countries because the culture is not the same, because the legal framework is not the same. You see important difference between the different countries?
Definitely. I'm going to say something that is maybe not politically correct, but in the territories or the countries where they are having the most impact because of climate change, it is way easier to work with them because they, it's very sensible. And I myself coming from a town in France, La Rochelle, where I lived, like some impacts with submersion and storms, and this is also because of that I'm in front of you today, because it's something that really touched me. So in these kind of territories where they have been affected, it is way easier to work with all the local stakeholders because they're all aware of it. They want to protect the area where they are working and where their families and citizens that they vote for them are located. So it is easier. And actually, France is quite an easy country to work with because we have a lot of different climates and impacts, unfortunately, already. I can also mention Brazil, which is very much ahead compared to other countries we're based in. But for sure, for Europe, all the countries that have a Mediterranean climate are much more affected than others. So France is part of it, but many others as well. Greece, we also have a lot of impacts in Greece with wildfires, so definitely.
Thank you. For AGEA, you see it's the same question. You see a progress in the exchange of best practices between the different territories, or maybe we need new tools to organize this exchange of best practices and cooperations?
We always need new tools. We always need more and more cooperation. We always need more and more committees to discuss. I fully agree with Valentin on the fact that we have huge differences between some region, and especially the ones who are very sensitive to climate change and to natural disasters. It is way easier to work with because they understand they understand more the situation. I talk about especially the overseas territory. We work a lot with our local stakeholders and general insurance agents in overseas, especially in Martinique and Mayotte. They know a lot about how to deal with the natural hazards, prevention, adaptation measures. They are very sensitive to it because, of course, and unfortunately, they live with this risk every day, and we live with this difficulty every day, which is not the case of some region in France. For example, in the south of France, in Occitanie, the region is very, very, very touched by a lot of natural disasters. It is going to be inundation, it is going to be flooding, drought, storms, and this is very. We are we have we are actually dealing with something that is very difficult. It's like in France, we have a culture of risk which is very different from a region to another, and this is very difficult to like teach everyone and train everyone on this subject. So yes, we have to improve on it, and we have to be inspired by the regions which are very good at it.
It's very, very clear. For Agua, decentralized cooperation between North and South, of course, I think it's very important. You see progress with the integration of adaptation issues in this decentralized cooperation.
What helps us here is we work in several different countries. What works here is that we combine it in systematic thinking. So in different countries in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, we work on river basin modeling. In Brazil, they apply it to adjust their adaptive management. In Egypt, they apply it to inform water reuse. In Malawi, they apply it to do hydropower planning. But all of them have to have a similar framing around water resilience or adaptation. All we bring them together and let them talk about how to frame risk, how to plan with uncertainty, how to do stress testing and make the best of your hydrologic models. We do it for hydrologic models. We do it for climate finance planning. We do it for inclusion, how to put inclusion in your national climate planning. In the different countries, they have different approaches and they can learn from it. This will work in one country, it won't work in the other country, but you bringing them together around the table will help to create those insights.
Thank you. It's time to conclude. I am a little bit late, but not so. We have time for a last round. Maybe for each panelist, what is now? It was the theme of this meeting. What is for you the one priority? One, not two or three. One priority for European Union policy and the new European strategy. Maybe first, Vinci.
Hard test to start. Well, I would say my first point in the that I mentioned in the PowerPoint. So having a common vision on where we should go all together. That's the first priority, I would say.
Thank you, Agia.
I think the main priority is the access of relevant data, and especially local ones that is to be understandable for all the local actors. That's the first priority.
It's clear. And Agua?
Yeah, for me, it will be to use water as a facilitator of climate planning. Water works cross-sectoral and it connects sectors, it connects countries.
It's clear too. And to finish, of course, CMR and Fabrizio about the priority for CMR and local governments.
Absolutely. Well, I will complete this with a point on policy, a point for our decision makers here in Brussels, but also within our national governments to ensure local leaders, the mayors, they are in the room when working on climate adaptation. This is absolutely needed, and make sure also that they have the flexibility to act and the finance to implement their actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy with this meeting because a lot of very concrete priorities, data, water, finance, of course, evolutions of all the framework to enforce cooperation. And all this question will be, of course, discussed on the summit, Climate Change Summit Adaptation in Brussels, 3 and 4 of June, in link with CMR and other non-state actors. We note all your reaction on the chat too. We integrate all your question, and it's a start of, it's not, of course, the end of the discussion about adaptation. It's the question for the next year. It's a very important question. We continue to discuss in Brussels during the Climate Change Summit. We continue to discuss with CMR and other non-state actors. Very much, and we continue to face this very important point. Very much.